and we are going through the advanced course of practical metaphysics written by Swami Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, back in 1926. Today is Lesson 9, the Bhagavad Gita. But first I'm going to play a few words of Yogananda's.
The charcoal and the diamond both receive the sunlight, but the charcoal does not really receive the light of the sun, but the diamond receives the light and reflects it and becomes resplendent. The ordinary man, he shuts his eyes to God and does not receive God's light. He roams in self-created darkness. But when true devotees in the company of masters open their eyes, they see the sun of omnipresence there, and they become like diamond souls. Charcoal under high pressure can be made into diamond, so ordinary souls under the high pressure and deep pressure of meditation can be diamond souls reflecting the Spirit. On this holy day, think of Christ and become Christ-like yourself. I have already given you rather a lengthy speech which I didn't want to give, but as the Spirit spoke, so I have spoken. God and Christ be with you. Adieu.
Okay, thank you, Paramahansa Yogananda. So he writes a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita, which you can imagine was all but unheard of during the 1920s, although it was first discovered a century earlier when the very first English translation came to America from India via the British. And we have Sir Edwin Arnold's Song Celestial translation, a very beautiful translation that Yogananda liked very much. It's been refined in Ananda's work by Swami Kriyananda, who refined it from its poetic approach to for more clarity to a yogic approach. Anyway, Yogananda writes that the Bhagavad Gita is the greatest Hindu Bible, the essence of the four Vedas, each of which, he writes, is as big as a large Webster dictionary, 108 Upanishads, and the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. The English translation of the term Bhagavad Gita is Song of the Spirit. It consists of 700 stanzas approximately, and was written by the sage Vyasa. Yogananda writes several years before the Christian era, although I think it would be probably several hundred years, perhaps is what he meant to say. Dialogue between the warrior prophet Krishna, who is the emperor of Gujarat, and his disciple Arjuna. It is one of the greatest psychometaphysical and scientific spiritual treatises in the world. The first stanza is a question that is, what is happening on the battlefield, because the Bhagavad Gita is but one chapter in the world's longest epic known as the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata is the story of the opposing clans related by family and birth, but opposing the Kurus and the Pandavas, meaning the bad guys and the good guys, the soul qualities and the ego qualities. And the very names of the different warriors, if you analyze the Sanskrit, are suggestive of certain psychological, spiritual qualities, positive and negative, which go to battle in the evolution of the soul. The pale King Pandu is compared, who is the father, as it were, of the good guys, the Pandavas, is compared to pure discrimination, pure wisdom. He has the 5 children, Yudhishthira, the elder, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva, representing the 5 faculties of discernment, representing in reverse order from Yudhishthira down, discernment or calmness, power, self-control, yama and niyama, meaning the do's and the don'ts. Now, in the first verse, what did they do? In reality, he writes, the king did not ask the question in the past tense, but given the battle scene, would have asked what are they doing? But he points out that the fact that it was written in the past tense is a suggestion that this entire chapter, and indeed the entire Mahabharata, is a metaphor, and that discrimination, is only really achieved after the fact of what we have done. And thus it is the suggestion that we each day reflect on that day's activities and ask ourselves, like Sanjaya, or like Dhritarashtra asking Sanjaya, his introspective mind, asking, how do we do today? So ask yourself, how do we do today? Let's see. He mentions that Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, declared in respect to the Gita, it shall uphold me both in life and death. Emerson carried a copy of it constantly with him. Mrs. Mary Baker Eddy, illustrious founder of the Christian Science movement, was well acquainted with it and quoted it in her textbook. The Bhagavad Gita, he says, may well be called the most beautiful exposition of spiritual truth that the mind of man has ever conceived. And so I want to point us all to the exposition of Yogananda's own commentaries, which he wrote in the last year or so of his life, culminating in 1952, at the conclusion of which he declared that his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita would touch millions of lives. Millions of people would find God through this great scripture. Unfortunately, it took about 50 years for his disciples to actually produce and publish and disseminate that, though he had written articles throughout his life, copies of which many of us have access to for inspiration. Those commentaries, as they were published 50 years later, are voluminous and, although very well done, a bit pedantic and difficult to read for the average person. Swami Kriyananda, a direct disciple who worked with Yogananda on those original commentaries, produced his own version back in 2004, and it constitutes the magnum opus of Swami Kriyananda's life, and is a much easier read. It distills the essence of Yogananda's insights and wisdom, and I highly recommend it. It's called The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda, published by Crystal Clarity Publishers. Okay, great souls, you'll see Padma tomorrow with the next installment of the Advanced Course in Practical Metaphysics.